What if the moment you die isn't the end, but the beginning of something extraordinary? What if, instead of darkness, you're greeted by light, by a presence so powerful it shakes your soul to its core? This is the story of Marcus, a man who lost everything in pursuit of success. But in the 10 minutes he was gone, clinically dead, he discovered a truth that changed everything he thought he knew about life, love, and what happens after we leave this world. This story was shared with us by one of our followers. If you have a near-death experience that changed your life, we'd love to hear it. Check the description below for our email, and we promise to publish your story while keeping your privacy protected. For the sake of confidentiality, we won't be using the real names or pictures of the person who experienced this event. But the truth of what happened remains unchanged, and it will shake you to your core. Before we dive in, let me ask you, if you were shown a glimpse of your life's greatest regrets, would you have the courage to change? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Now, let's uncover the life-changing story of Marcus and his journey beyond the veil. The morning sunlight streamed through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of Marcus Holloway's penthouse apartment, painting the room in warm gold. It was the kind of light that made people pause and breathe in gratitude for the gift of another day. But not Marcus. For him, the sunlight was an unwelcome guest, prying into the cold, sterile world he had built for himself. He sat at the sleek, glass dining table, dressed in a crisp suit and staring at his phone. His coffee sat untouched, its steam curling into the air as a reminder of his rushed routine. The phone buzzed constantly, emails, texts, reminders of meetings that required his full attention. And yet, none of them filled the gnawing emptiness that had taken root in his chest. Marcus was a man who had it all, or so it seemed. He was a respected CEO in the tech world, celebrated for his sharp mind and relentless drive. His colleagues admired him, his competitors feared him, and the world envied the empire he had built from the ground up. Yet, inside, Marcus felt hollow. In the corner of the room, his wife, Claire, prepared breakfast for their 2 children, Lily and Sam. She moved quietly, almost invisibly, as if afraid to disturb the fragile peace that hung in the air. "Good morning, Dad," Lily said softly, her voice barely audible over the faint clinking of dishes. Marcus glanced at her briefly, his eyes clouded with distraction. "Morning," he muttered, his tone devoid of warmth. Lily hesitated, her small hand clutching the edge of the table. She was only 9, but even she could sense the emotional wall her father had built around himself. Sam, her younger brother, stayed silent, his eyes fixed on his cereal as if willing himself to disappear. Claire placed a plate of toast in front of Marcus, her face a mask of practiced neutrality. "Don't forget, Lily has her recital tonight," she said, her voice tinged with quiet hope. Marcus barely registered her words, his attention glued to his phone. "I'll see if I can make it," he replied absently, his fingers tapping out a response to an email. Claire's shoulders sagged slightly, the flicker of hope extinguished. Marcus's days were a blur of boardrooms and phone calls, contracts and deadlines. He thrived in the chaos, or so he told himself. Work was his refuge, his armor against the parts of life he didn't want to face. His failing marriage, his children's longing for his attention, and the quiet whisper of dissatisfaction that echoed in his mind when the world grew still. But his relentless pursuit of success came at a cost. His health was deteriorating. The migraines had started 6 months ago, sharp and blinding, like knives driving through his skull. His doctor warned him to slow down, to eat better, to exercise. Marcus had nodded politely during the appointment and then promptly ignored the advice. Success doesn't wait for the weak, he often told himself, swallowing painkillers with sips of stale coffee as he prepared for another 12-hour day. One night, long after Claire and the kids had gone to bed, Marcus sat alone in his office. The city stretched out beneath him, a sea of glittering lights that felt both beautiful and unbearably distant. On his desk lay the remnants of his evening, a half-eaten sandwich, an empty coffee cup, and a photo of his family, slightly dusty and tucked behind a stack of papers. He picked up the photo, his thumb brushing over the smiling faces of Claire, Lily, and Sam. For a moment, something stirred in him, a faint ache, like a forgotten melody drifting back into memory. He thought about the nights he'd missed bedtime stories, the school events he'd skipped, and the countless times Claire had sat alone at the dinner table while he worked late. But the feeling was fleeting, drowned out by the ping of his phone, signaling another urgent email. Marcus placed the photo back on the desk, face down this time, and returned to work. The breaking point came one Saturday morning. Claire had planned a rare family outing, a picnic in the park, something simple but meaningful. "Just this once, Marcus," she had pleaded the night before. "The kids need this. I need this. We need you." He had reluctantly agreed, though his schedule for the weekend was already packed. But when the morning arrived, a last-minute call from a client derailed everything. Marcus stood in the doorway, his phone pressed to his ear as Claire loaded the car with the picnic basket and blankets. "I'll meet you there," he mouthed to her, giving a small wave as she drove off, her expression unreadable. He didn't make it. When Claire returned hours later, the silence in the house was deafening. She didn't speak, didn't yell. She simply looked at him, her eyes filled with a sadness that cut deeper than any argument could. That night, she slept in the guest room. Days turned into weeks, and the divide between Marcus and his family widened. The children stopped asking him to join their games or attend their events. Claire stopped leaving reminders on the fridge, her quiet resignation more painful than any confrontation. Marcus told himself it was temporary, that once he closed the next deal or hit the next milestone, he'd make time for them. But deep down, he knew better. He could feel them slipping away, like sand through his fingers, and he didn't know how to stop it. One particularly grueling evening, Marcus felt a sharp pain in his chest. It was brief but alarming, enough to make him sit down and catch his breath. "You need to see a doctor," Claire said when he mentioned it casually the next day. "It's nothing," Marcus replied, brushing it off. "Probably just stress." But the truth was, he didn't want to know. The idea of slowing down, of stepping back from the empire he had built, felt like failure. And Marcus Holloway didn't fail. One night, as Marcus worked late yet again, he noticed something unusual. The house was too quiet. Claire and the kids were supposed to be home, but there were no sounds of laughter or movement. He wandered into the living room, where a note sat on the coffee table. "Marcus, we've gone to my sister's for the weekend. We needed some space. I hope you'll use this time to think about what's truly important." For the first time in years, Marcus felt the weight of his choices. The house, once filled with the sounds of life, now felt like a mausoleum. He sat down on the couch, the note trembling in his hand. Around him, the silence pressed in, forcing him to confront the truth he had been avoiding for so long. He had sacrificed the people who mattered most in his pursuit of success. As the hours ticked by, Marcus stared out the window at the city below, his mind replaying every missed opportunity, every broken promise. The man who had built an empire now found himself utterly alone. The rain came down in relentless sheets that night, the kind of storm that turned highways into rivers and windshields into kaleidoscopes of streaking light. Marcus gripped the steering wheel of his sleek, black sedan, his knuckles white against the leather. He hated driving in storms. He hated being late even more. The glow of his phone on the passenger seat caught his eye. Another notification. Another message. Another task someone needed him to handle. His entire day had been a whirlwind of meetings, deadlines, and negotiations. It was always the same, a race he could never seem to win. With a resigned sigh, Marcus reached for the phone, his eyes darting from the road to the screen. The sharp ping of an incoming email filled the silence. He squinted at the subject line, "Urgent, decision needed by morning." His thumb hovered over the screen. The wind howled against the car, rattling the windows. Thunder rolled in the distance, a low, menacing growl that seemed to echo in his chest. For a brief moment, Marcus considered pulling over, waiting out the storm. But then he shook his head. He was already behind schedule, and time was money. He glanced up, the phone still in his hand, and caught a fleeting glimpse of something. A truck? Headlights? His heart stuttered, but before he could react, the blinding flash of an oncoming vehicle filled his vision. It happened in an instant, and yet stretched out into eternity. The truck barreled toward him, its horn a deafening scream that tore through the storm. Marcus dropped the phone and yanked the steering wheel, But it was too late. The impact was like an explosion, metal folding and twisting with a sound that seemed to tear the very fabric of the night. His body jerked violently as the car spun out of control, smashing into the guardrail. The airbags deployed with a force that knocked the breath from his lungs. Then, silence. Marcus's world narrowed to the sharp scent of burnt rubber, the faint crackle of the car radio, and the dull ache that radiated through his chest. He tried to move, but his body wouldn't obey. The rain continued to batter the car, water seeping in through shattered windows. His vision blurred, the edges of the world growing darker. Panic set in. He couldn't feel his legs. His breaths came in shallow, ragged gasps. Somewhere in the distance, he thought he heard voices, people shouting, footsteps splashing through the puddles. "Stay with us," a voice called, urgent and strained. He wanted to respond, to say something, anything, but his throat felt like it was full of sand. His head lolled to the side, and the last thing he saw was the rain-streaked face of a paramedic leaning over him, her expression grim. Time ceased to exist. One moment he was in the wreckage, surrounded by flashing red and blue lights, and the next, he was nowhere. The paramedics worked feverishly on Marcus, their hands moving with practiced precision. His body lay motionless on the stretcher, his chest eerily still. "He's coding," one shouted. "Starting compressions," another replied. The rain didn't let up as they worked, its relentless rhythm a cruel reminder of the life ebbing away before them. After several agonizing minutes, the team fell silent. "Time of death," one paramedic murmured, her voice heavy with defeat. 10:14 p.m. Marcus stood in the radiant glow of the ethereal realm, the warmth of the light wrapping around him like a comforting embrace. The air hummed with an indescribable melody, a harmony that seemed to seep into his very soul. Yet, despite the serenity, Marcus felt exposed, as if every hidden part of himself was being laid bare. A figure emerged from the light, luminous and commanding yet gentle. The being didn't speak with words, but its thoughts resonated in Marcus's mind, clear and undeniable. "Marcus," the angel began, its voice like a symphony of understanding and compassion. "You are at a crossroads. Your time here is brief, but the choices you've made must be confronted." The words hit Marcus like a tidal wave. Before he could respond, the light around him shifted, morphing into images, fragments of his life playing out like a movie reel. The first scene showed his wife, Clara, sitting alone at their dining table. Her hands were folded, her eyes downcast. A steaming plate of food sat untouched in front of her, its warmth fading, much like the warmth in their marriage. Marcus felt a pang in his chest. He remembered that night. He had promised to be home for dinner but had stayed late at the office instead, chasing another deal that now felt meaningless. "Your ambition consumed you," the angel said gently. "It blinded you to the love waiting for you at home." The image shifted. Clara was now tucking their young daughter, Sophie, into bed. The little girl's face lit up as she clutched a handmade card, decorated with colorful scribbles. "She made this for you," the angel continued. "Do you remember what happened next?" Marcus did. He had come home late that evening, brushing past Sophie with a distracted smile, too tired to notice the card in her tiny hands. That card, filled with her innocent love, had ended up forgotten on the kitchen counter. The vision faded, leaving Marcus staring at the ground, his heart heavy. "I didn't mean to hurt them," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I thought I was doing it all for them." "Intentions matter," the angel replied, "but so do actions. Love is not shown in words alone. It's in the moments, the sacrifices, the presence." The light shifted again, revealing an old college friend, David. The two were laughing over coffee, the camaraderie between them effortless and genuine. "David needed you," the angel said softly. "Do you remember when he called you, desperate for help?" Marcus's throat tightened. He did remember. David had called him late one night, his voice shaky, speaking of struggles Marcus didn't fully understand at the time. But Marcus had been in the middle of preparing for a presentation and had brushed David off with a vague promise to catch up later. That call was the last he ever received from his friend. The vision darkened, and Marcus saw David alone, sitting in a dimly lit room, his face etched with despair. He didn't have many people to turn to, the angel said, its tone tinged with sorrow. You could have been his lifeline. A sob escaped Marcus's lips. I didn't know, he choked out. You didn't listen, the angel replied, its words piercing but not unkind. The next image was harder to bear. It was Marcus's father, a man he had admired deeply but rarely visited in his later years. Your father needed connection, the angel said, not out of obligation, but out of love. Marcus watched as his father sat in a small, cluttered room, his hands shaking as he struggled to hold a photograph of Marcus as a child. The elderly man's eyes glistened with tears as he whispered, I miss him. Tears streamed down Marcus's face. I thought he was fine on his own. I didn't know he felt so lonely. The angel's light seemed to grow softer, more forgiving. You lived as though you had all the time in the world. But time is fleeting, Marcus. You must treasure the moments you have before they're gone. The visions faded, leaving Marcus alone with the angel. The warmth of the light did little to ease the cold ache in his heart. I'm sorry, Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. I've wasted so much. Can I ever make it right? You've been given a second chance, the angel said firmly. But know this. If you return to your old ways, the life you've built will crumble. Your path will lead to loneliness and regret. The angel stepped closer, its presence both comforting and commanding. But it doesn't have to end that way, Marcus. You can choose a different path. You can rekindle the relationships you've neglected and find the love and connection you've always longed for. Marcus felt a new energy stirring within him, a mixture of hope and resolve. What do I do? He asked, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. Go back, the angel said. Begin with the people who matter most. Listen to them. Be present for them. Show them love not just in words, but in action. The angel's light seemed to pulse with intensity as it continued. Success is not measured in wealth or accolades. True success is found in the lives you touch, the love you give, and the legacy you leave behind. Marcus nodded, his heart pounding. He felt the weight of the mission, but also its clarity. And one more thing, the angel added, its tone softening. Forgive yourself. You cannot heal others if you are trapped in your own guilt. Take the lessons you've learned and let them guide you. The room was silent except for the rhythmic beep of a heart monitor. Marcus's eyelids fluttered, heavy and reluctant, as if fighting against the pull of consciousness. A faint ache radiated through his body, but it was nothing compared to the warmth flooding his chest. Slowly, his eyes opened, adjusting to the sterile brightness of the hospital room. The first thing he saw was his wife, Emily, sitting by his bedside. Her face was a canvas of emotion, relief, exhaustion, and a glimmer of disbelief. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she leaned forward, her trembling hand clutching his. Marcus, she whispered, her voice cracking. You're back. His gaze shifted to the doorway, where his two children, Lily and Sam, stood frozen in shock. Lily, the eldest, let out a choked sob and rushed to his side, burying her face in his arm. Sam hung back, his wide eyes brimming with tears, unsure whether to approach. I'm here, Marcus croaked, his voice hoarse and unfamiliar. The words felt heavy, weighted with the gravity of everything he had just experienced. The memories of the angel's message were seared into his mind. The light, the revelations, the haunting clarity of seeing his life laid bare. All of it flooded back in a rush. He remembered the angel's voice, calm yet firm, showing him the hurt he had caused, the time he had wasted chasing things that didn't matter. Marcus reached for Emily's hand, his grip weak but purposeful. I'm so sorry, he whispered, his voice trembling. For everything. For the time I lost with you, with the kids. I see it now, all of it. Emily shook her head, tears streaming. You don't have to say anything right now. Just rest. You're here, Marcus. That's all that matters. But Marcus couldn't rest. The second chance he'd been given wasn't a gift he could take lightly. He looked at Lily, who had fallen asleep clutching his arm, and Sam, who now sat quietly at the edge of the bed, his small hand brushing against Marcus's. "I'll make it right," Marcus vowed silently. The most profound moment came on a stormy night. Marcus's daughter, Emma, had been struggling with nightmares, her small voice trembling as she clung to him in fear. Holding her close, Marcus felt a deep sense of guilt for all the nights he'd been too busy to tuck her in, too preoccupied to notice her worries. As the rain lashed against the windows and thunder roared, Emma whimpered, "Daddy, don't leave me. I'm here, sweetheart," he whispered, kissing her forehead. "I'm not going anywhere." Suddenly, the room felt different. The air grew warm, and the fear in Emma's eyes melted away, replaced by a serene calm. "It's okay now," she said softly, her tiny hand resting on his chest. "You're safe too." Marcus's heart swelled. He couldn't see it, but he felt it, a presence that wasn't his own, wrapping them in an invisible embrace. As Marcus's life began to heal, so did his purpose. He knew he couldn't keep his experience to himself. It was too important, too profound. Standing on a stage at a local community event in Indiana, he faced an audience of skeptical faces, his own hands trembling. "I used to think life was about climbing ladders," he began, his voice steady but raw. "I thought success meant more money, more power. But I was wrong." He shared everything, the accident, the angel, and the message that had saved his life. As he spoke, he saw tears in the eyes of strangers, nods of understanding, and the unspoken connection that came from shared humanity. "This isn't about religion," he concluded, his voice breaking. "It's about love, balance, and something greater than ourselves. Whatever you believe, know this: every second is a chance to choose love over fear." Marcus's story is a testament to the power of hope and redemption. He was given a gift, a chance to rewrite his life. Returning to the living, he didn't waste a second. He apologized to his wife with tears streaming down his face, holding her as if he could make up for all the lost time in that single moment. He knelt beside his children, listening to their stories with a tenderness they hadn't seen in years. He walked into his office and resigned from a job that had stolen his soul, vowing to live for what truly mattered: connection, love, and purpose. But the supernatural element of his journey lingered. Marcus often felt the presence of the angel, especially in moments of doubt. It was a warmth on his shoulders when he felt alone, a whisper of encouragement when he faltered, and a subtle nudge when he needed guidance. Marcus believed, without a doubt, that unseen forces were watching over him, guiding him back to his true path. And now, the question shifts to you. If you were shown the moments of your life you'd most regret, would you have the courage to change? Would you take the steps Marcus did to reconnect with the people and passions that truly matter? Or would you let time slip through your fingers, only to realize too late what you've lost? Marcus's story reminds us that it's never too late to transform, no matter how far you've strayed. If his journey moved you, we invite you to share this video with others who may need a spark of hope. Like this video, drop your opinion in the comment section, and subscribe to the Afterlife Chronicles to explore more incredible near-death experiences that uncover life's greatest mysteries. In our next story, you'll meet a woman who fell into icy waters, flatlining for over 15 minutes. What she experienced on the other side will not only chill your spine, but ignite your soul with the power of forgiveness. Stay tuned. You won't want to miss it.